On Thanksgiving Day, I arrived at my daughter's house unannounced and found my grandson sitting outside in 15-degree weather, wearing only a t-shirt and shorts. Inside, the whole family was gathered around the holiday table, laughing and enjoying turkey in the warmth. Shocked and furious, I kicked the door open and spoke 6 words that drained the color from their faces. But that was only the beginning of a justice that would change their lives forever. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and comment below with the time where you are watching from. My phone buzzed against the dashboard. A text from my neighbor. Saw police cars at the Hendersons again. Domestic issue. Reminded me of your family troubles. I stared at the message as my old Chevrolet idled in the driveway. The Hendersons. Martha always worried about their grandson too. Back when she was alive. Back when she had worries at all. Now it was just me, left with that gnawing concern every time I thought of Leona's marriage. The clock read 2:30 p.m. Time to move. I shifted into reverse and backed out onto Miller Street. Snow had started falling an hour earlier, thick flakes sticking to everything and making the road slick. The radio crackled with storm warnings as I turned onto I-75 south toward Cincinnati. The same classic rock station Martha and I always listened to was on. Led Zeppelin played something heavy, fitting my mood. On the passenger seat sat 2 gift bags. One with a new baseball glove for Amos, real leather, more expensive than I should have spent. The other had comic books, the kind he'd read since he was 12. He was 18 now, and might think he'd outgrown them. But I remembered being 18. No one's ever too old for heroes. Family is all we have, Martha used to remind me whenever I complained about holiday visits. She was right then, and she was right now, even if her voice only lived in my memory. 6 months since losing her, every gathering felt fragile and irreplaceable. The wipers struggled against the thickening snow. Cars ahead crawled at half speed, hazard lights blinking like anxious fireflies. I kept both hands firm on the wheel, holding steady at 40 miles an hour. There was no point arriving at all if I ended up in a ditch. Exit signs counted down the miles to Cincinnati. I tried calling Leona's house, hoping to let them know I was coming, maybe soften the surprise of my visit. The phone rang 6 times, then voicemail. Odd. Someone was usually home on Thanksgiving afternoon. A gas station came into view, its bright lights glowing through the gray snow like a beacon. I stopped to fill the tank and grabbed coffee along with the peppermints Amos liked. The tired-looking clerk shook his head at the weather. "Roads are getting worse by the hour," he said. "You driving far?" "Just to Cincinnati." "Family dinner. Be careful. Seen 3 accidents already today." Back in the truck, I checked the time. 3:05 p.m. The drive normally took 45 minutes, but today it would stretch closer to an hour. I thought of Amos, maybe helping his mother in the kitchen or watching football with Wilbur. He had grown a lot since summer, when we went fishing at Lake Erie. He'd caught his first base that day, smiling like he'd won the lottery. That's when I noticed the bruise on his arm. When I asked, he said he fell off his bike, but the mark looked too neat, too much like fingers. I should have pressed harder, asked more questions. Martha would have known what to do. The snow kept falling as I took exit 15 into Leona's neighborhood. Rows of 2-story houses stood lined with pumpkins, autumn wreaths, and some already strung with Christmas lights, glowing faintly through the snow. I slowed as I entered Maple Grove subdivision, passing homes where families likely gathered around tables, sharing stories over dinner. Warm light spilled from windows, glowing against white lawns. This was supposed to be a day of healing. Martha would have wanted that. Leona's street appeared ahead. Her blue 2-story house with white shutters stood at the end of the block. Wilbur's pickup was parked in the driveway beside her sedan. Smoke rose from the chimney, holiday decorations covered the porch. Everything looked normal, almost peaceful. I eased into the driveway behind Wilbur's truck, the engine ticking as it cooled. Snowflakes swirled around holiday lights framing the door. Faint music drifted from inside, warm and welcoming, like a Norman Rockwell painting. And then I saw him. Amos sat on the front steps, arms wrapped around his knees. No coat, no hat. Just a thin, long-sleeved shirt and jeans already dusted with snow. His shoulders shook, not only from cold but something deeper. Jesus Christ, I muttered, throwing the truck door open. The wind slapped my face, icy shards stinging my skin. In seconds, I reached him. His lips were blue, his body hunched, hands pressed tight against himself for warmth. "Amos," I called, rushing across the slick driveway. "What are you doing out here?" He looked up, relief flooding his pale face, cheeks blotched red from the cold. "Grandpa," he whispered, teeth chattering. I can't." I pulled off my heavy coat, wrapping it around his shivering frame before he could finish. His body was ice, trembling violently. "Can't what?" "What do you mean?" I steadied him when his legs nearly gave way. "How long have you been sitting out here?" "I'm not allowed." He pulled my coat tighter around him, shaking through the thick fabric. "I'm not allowed to go in the house." The words struck me like a blow. Through the brightly lit windows behind us, I could hear laughter and the television playing. Inside was the warmth of family celebration, while my grandson sat outside on the steps, shivering in the cold as though being punished. "What do you mean? Not allowed?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, fueled by a rising anger in my chest. "This is your home." Amos flinched at my tone and I quickly softened it. The last thing he needed was another adult raising their voice at him. "Please don't make it worse for me," he whispered, glancing anxiously at the door. "Please, Grandpa, if Wilbur hears you." I looked carefully at the house, the glowing lights, the festive sounds, the decorations. Then I turned back to my grandson, lips blue and body trembling in clothes far too thin for near-freezing weather. "How long, Amos?" I asked gently but firmly. "How long have you been out here?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. Since this morning." "This morning?" I checked my watch. "Nearly 3 o'clock. Son, it's below freezing. You could get frostbite." I stopped myself before frightening him further. I tried the front door handle. Locked. Of course. They had locked him out of his own home on Thanksgiving Day, leaving him to freeze while they enjoyed dinner inside. "We need to get you warm," I said, guiding him toward my truck. "Come on, let's get you into the cab where there's heat." As I helped him in, my thoughts raced. The way he recoiled at my raised voice, the bruises I'd noticed on our fishing trip, the way he carried himself, like someone who had learned to stay small and unnoticed. This wasn't new. This was a pattern. "Amos," I said as I turned the heat on full and wrapped a blanket from my emergency kit around his shoulders. His hands were so numb he couldn't hold anything, so I rubbed them between mine, trying to bring the warmth back. "Talk to me, son. What happened today?" Still trembling, he stared at his hands. "I was helping Mom with the turkey. She asked me to check it while she took a shower. I forgot to turn off the oven timer when I basted it." His voice was quiet, ashamed. "You forgot a timer?" "The turkey got a little burnt on top. Not ruined, just darker than usual." He finally looked up at me, fear in his eyes. "Wilbur came in and saw it and he lost it." My jaw tightened. "Lost it how?" He started yelling that I'd ruined the holiday. Said the guests would think Mom couldn't cook, that I was an embarrassment. Then he told me I needed to think about my actions, and that I couldn't come back inside until I learned responsibility. "And your mother?" I asked, harsher than I intended. She tried to say something at first, but Wilbur told her to stay out of it. "Said it was between him and me." He swallowed. She didn't say anything after that. I checked my watch again. 3:20. He had been outside for more than 4 hours in freezing weather, over a turkey that was barely burnt. I had to take deep breaths just to keep from shouting. "Has this happened before?" I asked. He hesitated, torn between the relief of telling someone and the fear of consequences. Finally, he whispered, "Sometimes. Last month he made me stay in the garage all night because I forgot to take out the trash. And once he locked me in the basement for 2 days because I broke one of his beer bottles." Each word hit me like a blow. I looked at my grandson, this good, kind boy who had never hurt anyone, and saw the way he carried himself, careful and cautious, as if existing was dangerous. "Does your mother know about this?" I asked. "She says Wilbur's just trying to teach me discipline, that I need to be more responsible." His voice cracked. "Maybe she's right." "Maybe I am." "Don't," I said firmly, turning to face him. "Don't you dare blame yourself. What he's doing isn't discipline. It's abuse, and it stops today." Amos's eyes widened with panic. "No, Grandpa, please. If you make a scene, he'll just punish me later. He always does. Through the windshield, the house still glowed warmly, full of laughter and music. Inside, my daughter served dinner to guests while her husband's stepson sat freezing in a truck, too scared to ask for kindness. "Listen to me," I said, holding his hands again. "You're 18 years old. You don't have to live like this anymore. And I'm not going to let you, but where would I go? I don't have money. I can't pay for college without—" "You'll come home with me tonight," I said, my decision firm. "We'll figure out the rest later." I saw the conflict in his face, hope battling fear. Hope that someone might finally stand up for him, fear that trusting it would only bring more pain. "He won't let me leave," Amos whispered. "He'll call the police. Say I stole something, or that you kidnapped me." I looked back at the glowing house, the festive lights, and felt something cold and unshakable settle inside me. Martha had always been the peacekeeper in our family, the one who smoothed over conflicts with patience. But this wasn't something I was willing to smooth over anymore. But Martha wasn't here anymore, and diplomacy hadn't shielded my grandson from 4 hours in near-freezing weather. "Let me worry about Wilbur," I said, opening the truck door. "Right now we're getting your things." I stepped into the snow, my boots crunching through the growing white blanket. Behind me, I heard Amos shuffle, my coat still draped over his shoulders. The front door remained locked, but I had no intention of knocking. I pulled Amos closer, though my hands were shaking from more than just the cold. They trembled with a rage that builds slowly, then crashes like a freight train when the full truth becomes clear. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" I asked, studying his face more closely. Shadows and cold red skin partially hid faint bruises along his jawline. "I tried to hint," he whispered, tightening the coat around himself. "But you always talk to Mom and she—" The memory hit like a slap. Last month, Amos had called while I was preparing dinner, his voice small and uncertain. "Grandpa Wilbur says I can't eat dinner with them anymore. I have to earn my way back to the table." I'd laughed it off, dismissing it as teenage drama. When I called Leona the next day, she brushed it off with her practiced ease since marrying Wilbur. "Dad, you're overreacting." "It's normal family discipline." Amos exaggerates. "You know, teenagers." Another memory surfaced, a summer phone call. Amos sounded exhausted. "Mom!" Wilbur yelled at me again for leaving dishes in the sink. He made me wash every dish twice. Later, when I asked Leona, she'd sighed with that familiar martyr-like patience. "He's just teaching responsibility. He's being dramatic. How long has he been treating you like this?" I asked, though part of me feared the answer. "Since Mom married him. 3 years ago," his voice barely audible. The torment started small, demanding perfection in chores, then escalated. I remembered the fishing trip last summer. How Amos hesitated to go home, asking if we could stay another day. At the time, I thought he simply enjoyed the lake. Now, I saw the signs differently. His quiet withdrawal when we mentioned driving him back, the shadow that crossed his face at the thought of school, the basement incident. "You mentioned sleeping in the garage. How many times?" I asked. "More than I want to count," he admitted, staring at his hands with shame. "Last winter, he locked me out for forgetting to shovel the driveway. I slept in your truck on Christmas Eve." My truck? He'd spent the night outside while I enjoyed eggnog inside, believing we had a perfect holiday. The guilt hit me hard. I looked toward the house, warm light spilling through the windows, faint laughter floating out. A perfect suburban holiday, while my grandson nearly froze to death on the steps. "Your mother knows about all this?" I asked. Amos nodded miserably. "She says Wilbur's just trying to make me better, that I need to stop being sensitive and learn to follow rules." The rage inside me sharpened, focused and hot. Martha used to warn me about my temper, urging me to count to 10. But Martha wasn't here, and counting wouldn't help Amos. I stood, still wrapping him in my coat. "Come on, we're going inside." "Grandpa, no." "Please, if you make a scene, he'll just what?" I turned fully to him. "Make you sleep outside in freezing weather? Beat you? Starve you?" My voice hardened. "Son, it can't get much worse than what's already happening." Amos looked toward the front door with fear. You don't understand how he reacts when challenged. But I was already moving toward the house, my grandson reluctantly following. The front door was solid, expensive. Wilbur's pride in every detail of his suburban fortress. I didn't knock. I struck the door with all my strength. 68 years old, decades of factory work behind me, but still stronger than most men half my age. The wood splintered with a crack that echoed through the neighborhood. The door slammed open, bouncing off the wall. Warm air rushed out, carrying the scent of roasted turkey and stunned silence. I stepped into the entryway, Amos close behind, and froze at the scene. The dining room table was magazine perfect. White tablecloth, flickering candles, crystal glasses catching the light. Wilbur sat at the head in a crisp button-down, carving knife in hand. Leona beside him, in a green dress I'd never seen, hair flawless. Across from them, a young girl, maybe 10, paused mid-bite. They were frozen in a perfect holiday moment, oblivious to the reality outside. The contrast struck me. Warm, comfortable, feasting, while Amos had shivered for over 4 hours. The golden turkey, likely a replacement for the one Amos had supposedly ruined, looked beautiful. Everything was pristine, peaceful. Everything, except the child left to freeze. Have you completely lost your minds? I bellowed. The little girl dropped her fork. Leona's face went pale. The serving spoon clattered, sending gravy across the cloth. Dad? Leona squeaked. What are you doing here? How did you… While you feast like royalty, that boy froze outside. I pointed at Amos, shivering in my coat. 4 hours, Leona. 4 hours in weather that could have killed him. Wilbur set down his carving knife, rising. Larger than I remembered, likely 50 pounds heavier, but size doesn't matter when anger fuels you. Who gave you permission to enter my house? His voice was controlled, dangerous, an unfamiliar challenge. Private property. You're trespassing. He moved toward us with predatory confidence, chest-puffed, ruling his domain. Private property? I stepped forward to confront him. You mean the property where you left my grandson outside in freezing weather while you ate dinner? The younger daughter began to cry, confused and frightened by the shouting. Leona reached out to comfort her, but her eyes never left mine. I could see the struggle on her face, torn between defending her father and standing up for her husband. This is a private family matter, Wilbur said, his voice rising. And you have no business? No business? I interrupted, feeling my anger flare. That's my grandson you nearly endangered with your so-called family matter. Behind me, Amos pressed closer, trembling. Not just from the cold, but from the fear of what might happen next. This was likely the first time anyone had confronted Wilbur in his own home, and we all knew it could escalate quickly. Soft holiday music played in the background, a cheerful tune about gratitude and family. The irony would have been amusing if I hadn't been so furious. I pointed directly at Amos, my hand steady despite the anger coursing through me. Look at him, Wilbur. Really? Look at what you've done. Wilbur crossed his arms and lifted his chin, every bit the man convinced of his justification. The boy ruined our holiday. He needed a lesson about responsibility and consequences. A lesson? I could barely process it. You nearly froze a child over a slightly burnt turkey. He's 18, not a child. And this is my house, my rules, Wilbur replied, his voice taking on that condescending tone men often use when they think they're reasonable. I'm trying to teach him discipline, something his mother clearly failed at in his first 17 years. Leona flinched but said nothing. Sitting in her green dress, her eyes flicking between us as though she were watching a match rather than a fight for her son's well-being. I stepped closer. Near the table, noticing the grease on Wilbur's plate and the wine stain on his lips. That's child abuse, I said. You're lucky I don't call the police right now. Wilbur laughed coldly, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. He ruined a $20 turkey. I sent him outside to reflect. That's not abuse, that's parenting. For 4 hours, in 5-degree weather. I shot back, my voice rising. He's shaking, his lips are blue. That's hypothermia. Wilbur waved me off. A little cold never hurt anyone. He's dramatic, as always. I looked at Amos, wrapped in my coat, shivering violently. Fine? I repeated incredulously. This man thought near hypothermia was fine. Dad, please. Leona finally interjected, her voice trembling. Don't ruin our holiday. We can discuss this later. Ruin your holiday? I asked, turning to my daughter. Your son sat outside freezing while you ate, and your concern is my ruining the holiday? She looked down at her plate, unable to meet my eyes. Wilbur shrugged. I'm just teaching Amos responsibility. Sometimes boys need firm guidance. Firm guidance? I snapped. Leona, when you were 18 and dented my truck, did I lock you out in a blizzard? Fail a math test? Sleep in the garage? That's different, she whispered. How? I demanded. Wilbur stepped forward, his face red with anger. Because this is my house, and Amos is not my biological son. I have every right to discipline him as I see fit. There it was, the truth. Amos wasn't his blood, so in Wilbur's eyes he didn't matter. He was simply an inconvenience to be controlled and punished. You have 30 seconds to apologize to my grandson, I said, my voice deadly calm. 30 seconds to show basic human decency. Wilbur's laugh was even colder this time. I owe him nothing. If he doesn't like my rules, he can live somewhere else. The little girl cried harder now, Leona trying to shush her, but I barely heard them. All I could focus on was Wilbur's smug face and Amos sitting on those steps for 4 hours, believing he deserved it. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the wine on Wilbur's breath. You're right. He is going somewhere else to live. I pulled out my phone slowly, deliberately, letting everyone in the room understand what I was considering. Wilbur's confidence cracked slightly at the sight. Either you apologize to my grandson right now, I said, my voice steady and cold, or I call Child Protective Services and report this abuse. You wouldn't dare, he muttered. Wilbur stepped closer, trying to use his size to intimidate me. I'd faced bigger men before, and I wasn't about to back down from anyone who harmed my family. Go ahead, I started dialing the first number. There was plenty to report about leaving an 18-year-old outside in freezing weather for 4 hours. Behind me, Amos gripped my arm, trembling, not from the cold, but from a fear of a different kind, the terror of someone who had learned that standing up only made things worse. Dad, please, he whispered. Leona finally moved, stepping between us, hands raised as if trying to prevent a fight. Don't destroy our family over this. I'm not destroying anything, I said, keeping my gaze on Wilbur. He'd earned this stare when he chose to abuse my grandson. Abuse. Wilbur scoffed bitterly. I was teaching him responsibility, something his weak mother never did. Leona flinched as though he'd struck her, but she didn't defend herself. She just stood there, silent, as she probably always had. Get out of my house, old man. Wilbur's voice rose. You have no authority here. Amos is my responsibility now. Your responsibility. I glanced around the immaculate dining room. Crystal glasses, fine china, holiday centerpiece, then back at my grandson's bruised face. Is this how you handle responsibility? Locking a child outside to freeze? The younger daughter was crying harder, confused and frightened by the shouting. Leona moved to comfort her, but kept glancing between me and Wilbur, like watching a tense match where someone might get hurt. He's not a child. He's 18, Wilbur said, standing tall. And in my house, adults who can't follow simple instructions face adult consequences. Adult consequences for forgetting to turn off a timer? For being careless and ruining a holiday? For embarrassing the family in front of guests? I asked, gesturing toward the empty chairs where everyone had evidently left because of the scene. A piece of the puzzle clicked. Guests had been here, enjoying dinner, while Amos sat outside freezing. And none of them had said a word. Grandpa, let's just go, Amos whispered behind me. Please, I don't want more problems. Hearing the defeat in his voice broke something inside me. This bright, kind young man had been beaten down so thoroughly that he thought asking for basic decency was the problem. You're not causing problems, son, I said loudly enough for all to hear. You never were. I turned back to Wilbur, my decision firm. You have 30 seconds to apologize to my grandson for what you did today. I'm not apologizing for anything, Wilbur said, crossing his arms. And I'm certainly not taking orders from a bitter old man who can't accept that his precious grandson needed discipline. Then we're done here. I closed my phone and put it away. Amos, pack your things. You're coming home with me. The silence was deafening. Even the little girl stopped crying for a moment. You can't just take him, Leona whispered. Watch me. I placed a firm hand on Amos's shoulder, guiding him away from the table toward the stairs. Go pack whatever you need. We're leaving, Dad, you can't do this. Leona followed, panic in her voice. You can't just walk into our house and take my son. I can. And I am. I kept walking, staying between Amos and the rest of the family. Unless you'd prefer I call the authorities and let them sort it out. Amos led the way up the narrow staircase, his steps quick and uncertain. Wilbur's heavy footsteps followed, but I didn't look back. This is kidnapping, Wilbur called. I'll have you arrested. Good luck explaining to the police why my grandson sat outside in 5-degree weather for 4 hours, I shot back. We reached the top of the stairs. I followed Amos down a short hallway to a small room at the back of the house. The room was barely large enough for a twin bed and a small dresser. There was no visible heat vent, and the single window faced north, letting in the coldest air. It felt more like a storage space than a bedroom, clearly the worst room in the house. This is where you sleep? I asked, taking in the sparse furnishings and bare walls. Amos nodded, already pulling clothes from the dresser and stuffing them into a duffel bag. Wilbur had said the basement room was for guests, while the upstairs room was for my sister. I noticed he didn't say our sister, just my sister. Even in his own home, he felt like an outsider. Take everything that matters to you, I said, standing guard at the doorway as he packed. We're not coming back for anything, Amos. Think about what you're doing. Leona appeared in the doorway, tears streaking her face. This is your home. Your family? Some family, Amos muttered, folding a Dayton University sweatshirt. Real families don't lock each other out in the cold. Wilbur called it a lesson in responsibility, but it gave me hypothermia. He looked up at his mother, eyes heavy with 3 years of hurt. Mom, last week he made me sleep in the garage because I left a glass in the sink. A glass? That's not normal. Leona's face crumpled. He has high standards. He wants me to be better. He wants me gone, Amos said quietly, zipping up his bag. We made our way downstairs, Wilbur waiting at the bottom like a bouncer. You leave my house, boy, and don't come back. Fine by me, Amos said, a strength in his voice I hadn't heard all day. The front door hung open from when I had kicked it in, cold air rushing in, making holiday decorations flutter like dying leaves. I could see my truck in the driveway, engine running, exhaust visible in the frigid air. Please don't do this. I love you, Leona called out. If you loved me, Mom, you wouldn't have let this happen, Amos said, turning for one last look. We walked to my truck in silence, our breath visible in the freezing air. I tossed his bag into the bed and helped him into the passenger seat, then walked around to the driver's side. Through the front window, I could see the family still standing in the entryway, Leona crying, Wilbur red-faced with anger, the little girl peeking around the corner. You ready? I asked. I've been ready for 3 years, Amos said, pulling my coat tighter around his shoulders. I backed out of the driveway and onto the street, past other decorated houses where families were likely finishing their Thanksgiving dinners in peace. The radio played classic rock, the heater working perfectly. For the first time since I arrived, Amos looked like he could truly breathe. Thank you, Grandpa, he said quietly as we turned onto the highway. I should have come sooner, I admitted. I should have seen what was happening. I tried to warn you, but I didn't know how. We drove in comfortable silence, the weight of family responsibility settling around me like Martha's favorite quilt. This boy needed protection, a safe place to grow into the man he was meant to be. Tell me about college, I said as we merged onto I-75 North. What are you studying? Engineering, he said, voice gaining strength. Mechanical engineering, like you did at the factory. Like grandfather, like grandson. I smiled, thinking of Martha and how proud she would have been. We'll figure out tuition. Don't worry about that. Grandpa, I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. You're family. Family takes care of each other. As we approached my driveway, smaller than I remembered with both trucks side by side, the house glowed with welcome. I'd left the porch light on out of habit, grateful now for the small beacon cutting through the winter darkness. Home, sweet home, I said, helping Amos carry his bag inside. The key turned easily and warm air greeted us. The house smelled of coffee and Martha's lavender sachets. Modest and worn, it wasn't much, but it was ours. You remember the guest room? I asked, turning on lights as we moved through the living room. Yeah, down the hall next to your room. Amos looked around, relief on his face. It's warm in here. Thermostat set to 72 year-round. Your grandmother always said life's too short to be cold in your own house. I showed him the guest room and helped him settle in. Extra blankets in the closet, a double bed with Martha's quilt, a dresser, and a reading chair by the window. Family photos lined the walls, including several of Amos at different ages. Seeing him here felt right, in a way nothing had since Martha passed. I'll get dinner started. Nothing fancy. Chicken in the freezer, vegetables to use up. Can I help? He asked, wanting to be useful, to earn his place. Sure, but you don't have to. This is your home now, not a job. We worked together in the kitchen, and gradually the day's tension lifted from Amos's shoulders. I thawed the chicken in the microwave while he washed the vegetables, moving around each other with the easy rhythm of family members who had cooked together before. Tell me everything that's been going on, I said, seasoning the chicken. Start from when your mother married Wilbur. Amos was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing how much to share. It began subtly. Little remarks about loading the dishwasher wrong or leaving shoes out of place. Then it escalated. How much? He controls everything. What I eat, when I can shower, even when I can use my phone. His voice grew smaller as he spoke. He forced Mom to choose between him and me. She chose him. I had to pause, gripping the counter. What do you mean she chose him? I asked. Last Christmas when you visited, remember how quiet I was at dinner? Wilbur said I wasn't allowed to speak unless someone asked me a direct question, and Mom didn't stop him. The memory hit me like a punch. I had assumed Amos was just being a moody teen, even joking with Martha later about how kids these days didn't know how to make conversation. Why doesn't your mother stand up to him? I asked. Amos chopped carrots with precise mechanical movements. She's scared, he said. She once told me if she left him, she'd lose the house and have to move back to that apartment complex we lived in before. She can't afford to take care of us on her own. I slid the chicken into the oven and started a fire in the living room fireplace. The familiar ritual of stacking kindling and lighting newspaper helped steady my thoughts. Come sit with me, I said when the fire crackled steadily. Tell me about the good things. School, your friends. We settled into the chairs by the fire, and for the first time all day, Amos smiled. I made the dean's list last semester, and there's this friend, Jake, teaching me guitar. I pointed to a framed photo on the mantle of Martha at age 20, laughing with an acoustic guitar. She always said music was the language of the soul. Amos studied it with interest. I miss her, he said. Me too, son, I said. Me too. We talked until the chicken was done, sharing memories of Martha and discussing Amos's spring semester plans. The house felt alive again, filled with conversation and laughter, like when Martha had been here. As we sat down to eat our simple meal, I really looked at my grandson. The fear was gone from his eyes, replaced with something I hadn't seen in years, hope. We'll call the college tomorrow, I said, cutting into the chicken. Make sure your financial aid is sorted, and we'll look into a part-time job if you want one. Grandpa, you don't have to do all this for me, Amos said. Yes, I do, I replied, meeting his eyes. That's what family's for. The phone rang just as we finished dessert, leftover pie from the freezer. The sound sliced through our peaceful evening, and Amos tensed immediately. I glanced at the caller ID. Leona, 3 sharp knocks shattered. The calm at the front door, authoritative, demanding immediate attention. Amos nearly dropped his coffee. Grandpa, stay behind me, I said, setting my cup down and moving toward the door. The knocking grew more insistent, joined by multiple voices on the porch. I flipped on the light and looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers stood on the doorstep. Behind them, like predators, were Wilbur and Leona. Mr. Burke, the lead officer called. Police. We need to speak with you. I took a deep breath, opening the door while keeping Amos shielded. What? Can I do for you, officers? Wilbur immediately stepped forward, pointing at me. This man kidnapped my stepson, broke into our house and took the boy. The lead officer raised his hand. Sir, we need to sort this out. Mr. Burke, is there a young man named Amos Green here? Yes, I said simply. My grandson is here. Wilbur's voice rose dramatically. He kidnapped him, dragged him from his family. Is he here voluntarily? The second officer asked, taking out a notepad. Amos appeared beside me, wrapped in a blanket. I want to stay with my grandpa, he said, quiet but clear. Wilbur's face flushed. See? He's filling the boy's head with lies, turning him against us. What lies? I asked, stepping forward slightly. The truth about leaving him outside in freezing weather for 4 hours. The truth about 3 years of abuse. Wilbur laughed, forced. I was teaching him responsibility. He ruined Thanksgiving dinner. He needed to learn consequences. The first officer, weary from family disputes, said, Mr. Burke, everyone needs to come inside to discuss this properly. I stepped back, letting the officers into the living room. Wilbur followed, Leona trailing with her gaze on the floor, diminished somehow, realizing the cost of her choices. The officer opened his notepad. Let's start from the beginning. Mr. Green, you claim this man kidnapped your stepson. Absolutely, I said. Wilbur straightened his shoulders, putting on the composed, authoritative demeanor I recognized so well. I arrived home from work to find my front door broken and Amos missing. When I called around, neighbors said they saw an older man forcing the boy into a truck. Forcing? I asked, disbelief thick in my voice. Officer, I rescued my grandson from child abuse. That's what he claims, Wilbur said, shaking his head with feigned sadness. But the truth is, he never approved of my marriage to his daughter. He's just looking for an excuse to cause trouble. The officer turned to Amos, who was standing close enough that I could feel his trembling. Son, did this man force you to go with him? No, sir, Amos whispered. He saved me. Saved you from what? Amos glanced nervously at Wilbur, then back at the officer. From freezing to death on the front porch. The second officer looked up from his notepad. Explain that. I accidentally burned the turkey this morning. Wilbur made me sit outside in the cold to reflect on my actions. I was out there for over 4 hours in 5-degree weather. He's exaggerating, Wilbur interjected quickly. It was maybe an hour, and he was dressed warmly. An hour? I said, staring at him. Officer, I have witnesses. My grandson was sitting on that porch in a thin shirt and jeans when I arrived at 3:15. He'd been there since 11 a.m. The first officer looked at Wilbur more closely. Sir, is it true you made the boy sit outside? As punishment? Briefly, yes, Wilbur admitted, though he tried to downplay it. But he's making it sound worse than it was. It wasn't hours in freezing weather. His confident mask began to slip. Look, sometimes teenagers need firm discipline. His mother and I agreed that... No, she didn't agree to anything, Amos said, his voice gaining strength. She just didn't stop you. All eyes turned to Leona, who had been silent the entire time. She stood by the doorway, hands clasped tightly, looking like she was ready to flee. Ma'am, the officer prompted gently. What's your version of events? Leona looked as if she were on the edge of a cliff, knowing her next words could either save her or plunge her into chaos. Her hands shook as she glanced between Wilbur's expectant face and Amos's hopeful eyes. Mrs. Green, the officer said softly, we need to know what really happened today. Wilbur moved closer to her, subtly intimidating her with his posture, his looming presence, the warning in his eyes. Tell them, honey. Tell them how your father has been poisoning Amos against our family, he urged. The officer noticed it too. Sir, step back and let your wife speak for herself. Leona's voice emerged as a whisper. She cleared her throat. Amos did burn the turkey this morning, she admitted. Her eyes darted toward Wilbur and quickly away. He said Amos needed to learn responsibility by sitting outside in freezing weather. He said it would teach him to be more careful. How long was he outside, ma'am? She glanced at Wilbur, rigid with barely contained anger. Since around 11, until my father arrived. Around 3:15, the officer calculated silently. over 4 hours in 5-degree weather. He could have come inside any time if he'd apologized and shown remorse, Wilbur added. No, he couldn't, Leona said firmly, and all heads turned toward her. You locked the door. You told me not to let him in no matter what. The silence was deafening. Wilbur's face shifted from white to red, then back to white. Leona, he said quietly, dangerously. What are you doing? I'm telling the truth, she said, looking at Amos, tears welling. For the first time in 3 years, I'm telling the truth. The officer leaned forward. Mrs. Green, has this kind of punishment happened before? Yes, she said, words rushing out as if held back for years. He's made Amos sleep in the garage, in the basement. He's locked him out overnight. He controls when Amos eats, showers, or speaks at the table. Leona, stop! Wilbur shouted. His facade finally broke. You don't know what you're doing. You'll destroy everything we've built. What have we built except fear and misery? She snapped. Look at my son. Look at what you've done to him. I watched Amos's expression change as his mother finally defended him. Years of self-doubt and fear seemed to lift as he realized someone else could see his suffering. The first officer stood and approached Wilbur. Sir, I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. This is ridiculous. You'll arrest me based on the word of a bitter old man and his delusional daughter? Based on physical evidence and multiple testimonies about child endangerment, the officer replied calmly, producing handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. As they led him out, Wilbur glared at Leona. You'll regret this. You'll lose everything. The house, the money, everything. You'll be nothing without me. I'd rather be nothing than watch you hurt my son, she said, her voice strong for the first time in years. The door closed, leaving us alone. Leona collapsed into a chair, crying deeply, letting years of suppressed pain pour out. Amos knelt beside her. Mom, it's okay. It's over now. I'm so sorry, she whispered through her tears. I should have protected you. You were strong tonight, I said, settling by the fireplace. You chose your son over your husband when it mattered most. That took courage. The fire crackled, and for the first time in months, the house felt like home. The truth had been spoken, justice served. Amos looked up. What happens now, Grandpa? Now we heal, I said simply. We take our time and heal. 4 months later, sunlight filled the kitchen. Leona flipped pancakes while Amos read his Ohio State acceptance letter. Full scholarship, he said, for the 10th time that week. I still couldn't quite believe it. They're actually paying me to go to school. That's what happens when you're smart and work hard, Leona said, sliding a stack of pancakes onto my plate. She looked different now, stronger, more confident. Her part-time job at the library had given her independence, and the divorce settlement provided enough for a fresh start. Your grandmother would have been so proud, I said, settling into my chair with my coffee. The kitchen felt alive in a way it hadn't since Martha passed, full of laughter, conversation, and the warm chaos of family. Leona had moved in permanently after Wilbur's conviction. The guest room became her space, and we transformed the basement into a proper bedroom for Amos. It wasn't a cramped, uncomfortable room like Wilbur's house. It was bright, heated, and welcoming. Dad, are you sure you don't mind us staying indefinitely? Leona asked at the table. I know you value your independence. Independence is overrated, I said sincerely. Family matters more. Besides, who else would make sure Amos doesn't accidentally burn down the kitchen? That was one time, Amos protested, laughing. And the fire was tiny. The phone rang and Leona answered. Burke residence. Oh, hi, Jake. Yes, he's here. Guitar practice at 4. Sure, I'll tell him. She hung up and turned to us. Your friend Jake wants to know if you're still practicing for the talent show. Talent show? I raised an eyebrow. You didn't mention that. Amos grinned, full of confidence. It's nothing major. Jake and I are doing an acoustic set, a couple of classic rock songs. You promised to be in the front row. After breakfast. I found Leona arranging family photos on the mantel alongside Martha's pictures. Amos missed high school graduation, our recent fishing trip, and our first real Christmas together in years. Any word from Wilbur? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. His lawyer called. Anger management is going well, but he lost his supermarket job, Leona replied, unconcerned. He's moving back to Cleveland to live with his sister. Good. The farther, the better, I said. I feel sorry for him sometimes, she admitted. But then I remember what he did to Amos, and it fades quickly. That afternoon, while Amos was at practice, Leona and I worked in the garden, preparing the soil for Martha's vegetable patch. Spring was early this year, and planting seeds felt full of hope. Dad, Leona said, pulling weeds with determination, I need to thank you again. If you hadn't come that day, no need to thank me, I said, turning over stubborn earth. I was just doing what any grandfather would. No, you weren't. You risked everything, arrest, charges, but you saved him. Truth has a way of winning, I thought, as she smiled and wiped her hands. That evening, we settled into our routine, dinner together, then a game show or movie. It wasn't glamorous, but it was exactly what we needed. Predictable, peaceful, safe. Amos quietly practiced guitar, Leona worked a crossword, and I read the newspaper. Normal family life, once impossible. Grandpa, Amos said during a commercial break. I'm thinking about changing my major. From engineering to social work, maybe counseling. I want to help kids going through what I did. A swell of pride hit me. This young man, with every right to be bitter, wanted to use his experience to help others. That's a fine goal, I said. Your grandmother always said the best way to heal is by helping others avoid pain. Did she really say that? Yes, along with countless other wisdom I should have listened to more carefully. Later, as Leona dozed in her chair, Amos and I stepped onto the porch to watch the stars. The night was clear and cold, but far from that terrible Thanksgiving when I found him frozen on Wilbur's doorstep. Ready for fishing season? I asked. Can't wait. Think we'll catch anything bigger than last year? With your luck? Probably a whale. We stood in comfortable silence, 2 generations reunited through truth and crisis. Soon, Amos would head to college and build his own life. But our foundation was solid. Honesty, protection, and unconditional love. Grandpa, Amos said as we went inside, thank you for coming to get me. Thank you for being worth saving. The house was warm and bright. 3 people had learned family isn't just blood. It's showing up, telling the truth, and protecting those you love. Martha would have been proud. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. For the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.